everyone. Welcome to Dungeon Con Online. I believe we're the first stream, so I think we're
Oh,
like officially kicking off what I hope will be a very fun weekend of gaming and panels. We're very excited to be a part of this online event. And even though we're still in the times of COVID, it's nice to be able to connect with each other through the virtual spaces. So this will be a lot of fun. We are the team behind the Storytelling Collective, which we'll talk a little bit about in just a minute. But our topic today is about how to be an awesome game designer. And we're going to delve into what that means after we do just a quick housekeeping item, which is to let you know that you are welcome to submit questions to us during the panel. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on the chat and moderating our discussion today. So if you have a question, please put your question in the chat. And if you could put the word question in all caps right before whatever you want to ask, just so I can make sure that I can see it and we don't miss anything. But yeah, so like I said, we are the Storytelling Collective, formerly the RPG Writer Workshop, which some of you might be familiar with. The Storytelling Collective is an online learning program where we help writers basically get started with their various creative goals and endeavors. We've recently branched out to offer courses and programs on things beyond just tabletop, but that still remains our main focus, and I would say probably our main passion. Our flagship program is the Write Your First Adventure Workshop, which happens every July and November. And we're gearing up for our seventh Write Your First Adventure Workshop in July, which is wild. The last few years have gone by very quickly. And we're currently wrapping up our Write Your First Encounter Workshop, which is a new program that we've just launched this year. And it seems to be going well so far, but it's essentially a precursor to that bigger summer program. So that's just a little bit about us. You can learn about everything that we do at storytellingcollective.com. We're also on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. And I think that covers most of the platforms and Discord. So why don't we introduce our wonderful panel today? I'm going to go in clockwork order based off of how I see you on my screen. So Amani, that means you're first up. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell our viewers a little bit about you?
sure. Hi, I'm Imani. I am a game designer. You can find my games under Margaret Catter Development or Margaret Catter on it.io. I'm mcatterdev on Twitter. But basically, I make tabletop games. Occasionally, I make board games, or I'm attempting to make a board game anyway. And I have a terrible, terrible habit of going, but what if I made an original system? And that's where I end up every single time. And it's a choice that I make. It's just a choice that I make.
I don't know if that's a terrible decision though, because
I mean, it isn't because realistically, I couldn't do what I want in other systems. But like, I need to like, I wish I could just think my ideas onto paper without having to write them out. Like, I just need to like, we have to get to the point where like ideas are just, poof, and it's there.
yeah, that's the
'Cause
dream, right?
and yeah, it's hard work. It's a lot of hard work trying to get my what I want to be in real life.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's the struggle I think every writer encounters in their creative career. But that's partly why we have you here as our guest, our special guest today, because you are so
Yay!
prolific and you have designed original games and written for existing game systems. So we have lots of juicy questions for you, which we'll get to very shortly. But thank
Yay.
you for joining us today.
Thank you for
Um,
having me.
Jack, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Jack. I am the community manager for Storytelling Collective, and I also am the creator relations rep for DM's Guild and One Bookshelf. So I do a lot of product approvals for the new things that are coming in from new publishers on Drive-Thru RPG, and I read a lot of the titles that get posted on DM's Guild. So I see a lot of stuff that content creators make.
Yes, and we're lucky to have Jack also be a part of DM's Guild and to have his wealth of knowledge be applied to everything that we do here at the Storytelling Collective. So thanks for joining us, Jack. have some good questions for you as well.
Oh
So
gosh.
I hope you're ready. It's okay. No curveballs. I promised you all that when I invited you, so I will stick to that. HR, our awesome one-person HR department is what we can give you. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name's HR, and contrary to popular belief, it actually stands for Hannah Renee instead of Human Resources. But um, my name's HR. I am a TTRPG narrative designer. I've worked on solo projects and a group project that's coming out soon. Not another Monster Quest book, or not just another Monster Quest book. It's kind of gone back and forth with those names. I'm also primarily, for the purposes of this stream, I am the party support class for the Storytelling Collective. So you might have seen me hopping around in the discussion boards on our courses or in our Discord. I'm basically here to help. So if you have a problem, call HR. So yeah, I think that essentially sums it up. I don't know. Yes. And I'm
Yes.
ready for your quiz today, Ashley. Whatever.
Oh, good. It's definitely graded, so I hope you
Okay.
all studied. Of course, surprise. Yes, and thank you for all of your contributions to the Storytelling Collective. You are also a prolific creator outside of the work that you do with us, and yeah, I think we have a really good group here with lots of different viewpoints on game design. And I am Ashley Warren. I'm the founder and director of the Storytelling Collective. I've been running this program since 2018. And it's been wonderful just to see our community grow over the past couple of years. Every workshop, I think, gets better and better. Imani's been a part of quite a few of our workshops and has been a part of our community for quite a long time now. And I'm very grateful to have Jack and Hannah Renee be a part of the team as well, because there's a lot to do with our program. We have a large global community of designers, which is really truly very exciting, and it's always really rewarding to see the work that is produced after each of our workshops. Aside from that, the work that I do with the Storytelling Collective, I'm also a co-author of Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden, of Hecna with Hit Point Press, Legend Lore with Onyx Paths Publishing, and I've written lots of other things. I did a project called the Uncaged Anthology, and yeah, I've spent a lot of the last few years doing D&D projects and projects in the tabletop community. So we're very excited to delve into our topic today, which is how to be an awesome game designer. Which, of course, is a very reasonable topic to cover in just 1 hour. There's only a couple things to really talk about. So we're mostly just going to discuss some of the basics and hopefully inspire and motivate you all on your creative journeys. But to start, I think we should talk about what is what does being a game designer entail? And I also want to include narrative design into that. It was kind of too long to put in the title of the panel, but I think we should at least establish what we think being a game designer and a narrative designer is. Imani, do you want to kick us off and share how you define those two and where they're similar and different?
So I feel like for me personally, the way I think about it is just to make my life easier. Game design is like the mechanics, the thing, the system that you're using to do the thing, and narrative design is like the way you tell a story. Because like you can take a story and put it in like there's a story that you can tell. Like you can tell the same story in like Monster Hearts that you can theoretically tell in Bubblegum Shoe. I mean, barring some slight differences, but like the mechanics, how you move the game itself forward are different depending on the system that you're using. If that makes sense.
Yes, for sure. And I think that's kind of how a lot of people define it, looking at game design as more of the mechanical, like actual, like technical how to facilitate parts of the story, whereas the narrative design is factoring in obviously the mechanical part, but it's more of where do you account for player choice? How does the story play out in this interactive medium? Hannah Renee, do you have any thoughts on the similarities and differences between game design and narrative design?
Yeah, I think that Imani really had a really good point about like the mechanics of it, and that where it where they differ, I think, is in the interactivity, in that when you're designing a narrative, you're telling a story, whereas when you're designing a game, it's a story that's made to be interacted with, and whether that is through a system like Dungeons and Dragons, Monster of the Week, Call of Cthulhu, and those are just to name a couple, or a video game or a board game, however you are kind of using that framework, it is essentially made to be molded with and to be changed by whoever is interacting with it. And I guess to an extent you could argue that people interact with narrative design in similar ways, whether it be like fan fiction or fan art, or taking worlds and branching off of those. But even then, that kind of blurs into that play area of like, how do you take an existing realm and use it as a skeletal framework to create your own stories and really immerse yourself into it. So I think that's kind of where they interact, in my mind at least. But yeah.
Sure, I think that makes sense. And there's definitely a close relationship there between game design and narrative design, because both inform the other. Like once you have your story, choosing the right mechanics and the rule set and the system for that really helps tell certain stories. And you can tell the same story in a lot of different ways depending on the mechanics that you choose. But then vice versa, you can use the game mechanics to help facilitate your story in unique ways. Jack, as an avid gamer, what do you think about those differences and similarities there? From the perspective of a player, do you see those as having quite a bit of overlap?
Yeah, there's a lot, especially with looking at things on like DM's Guild. There's a lot of things that are they're joined together in a lot of the titles that you'll see. There's not a lot of system agnostic things on DM's Guild, because Dungeons and Dragons is intertwined into all of the narratives that are being told throughout that whole all the products on there. Alternatively, on drive-through, I see a lot of system agnostic titles come through where any system could be applied to the narrative that somebody has written down. They've made it in a way that's very they've built this kind of the outside, and you fill in the skeleton of the story with the system behind it, and seeing that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool. I personally find writing for system agnostic games to be quite challenging, because you are creating kind of a framework that can be applied to so many different things. Amani, I know that since you've written both your own original games, but also for existing game systems, like how do you, I know that you like system agnostic is something that you know quite a lot about. When you're writing a story, what are the considerations that you have to take
So
into account?
when I'm writing a story, when I'm writing something that's system agnostic, which I do from time to time, but then I usually end up like going, I'll just make a system myself. But when I start off, when I first start doing it, I think of it like a choose your own adventure branching novel. So like I don't know if anyone knows the software Twine. And so I just like, it doesn't matter how you get to point A or what you need to roll or whatever, like whatever questions you ask to get to the other branches. It's just that these are the options that you have. Figure out whatever system you're using to get to that fit. Like it could be like, I want to say it's Pathfinder, but I could be wrong. Where it's just like, oh, if you ask certain sets of questions in what is that? What's the Winter Witch one? The fake Russian one. If you ask a specific person some questions, it only these questions, and if you walk away, that's the end of it. That's literally, and like the way you can get to it, the way you do it in Pathfinder is through like you just roll a dice, and if you get the high number that you need, she'll answer these questions. But like in another game, it could be like in like a mass Powered by the Apocalypse style game, it would be like you've rolled a 7, you just ask 2 questions, as opposed to like Pathfinder, like if you roll a 14, she'll answer everything from this point down, whether you ask the question or not. Which is the way, like, again, it's like the narrative is the same, but the manner in which you get to the point is not the same.
Sure.
but yeah, I abused twine in a way that is not intended to be used, and I'm just like, look, it's an easy way to make a bunch of branching paths. It's like this giant mind map of like, okay, we went left.
Mm-hmm.
And
That
I
is, I
mean,
think. Oh yeah, go ahead, Hannah.
I was gonna say, I mean, isn't abusing and using a system in the way it's not intended in its own way a way of playing with it? So
Yeah,
like,
no, I mean, I don't think the person who made Twine is gonna be upset with me, but I definitely think they look at it and go, it's functioning. Like, it is a functioning product, but that's not what you were supposed to do to get there.
Yeah, I think when you design tools like that that are for that purpose of, you know, really creative and interactive and immersive storytelling, you kind of have to expect that people are going to push it to its limits and use it in different ways. And for those who are unfamiliar, Twine is an online, I think it's open source software that is for game and narrative designers, people writing interactive fiction that does account for those branching paths, which is kind of one of the defining elements of tabletop writing, of course. So it's a really great tool to just play around with. I think once you get to know it, it can become a really valuable tool in your creative toolkit. So yeah, so maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that.
I just threw the link in chat. It is open source. There are bits of it that are a little weird. Also, you're not allowed to call it choose your own adventure because they will come after you and sue you.
Yep.
Just as an aside, that's a thing.
Yes, it's pick your path now. I think you can use,
right? Like choose your own adventure is a very specific brand.
Yeah.
That you're not here to play.
Yep. I remember seeing that was, I think, trademarked or something. Just kind of annoying because a lot of folks in our community want to write the.
Well, I blame Netflix. It's Netflix's fault. Had they not tried it with Black Mirror, they wouldn't have cared. But Netflix tried to come at them and not give them their money, and they were like, no. So
thanks, Netflix, for ruining it for the rest of us.
Basically,
just kidding. Don't sue me.
I mean, Netflix, if you want to notice me,
if you want to, like, you know, fund some of our projects, we won't say
yeah,
that.
Like please notice me, but not for that.
Yeah, well, I think bringing up Black Mirror is actually, I think, a good example for narrative design in a medium that's not necessarily tabletop. They have an episode called Bandersnatch where you actually get to interact with the episode and you use your remote to make choices as they're presented to you. And based off of those choices, the episode changes. And so that's kind of cool to see that medium being used for, you know, television. I hope we'll see more of that because I think that a lot of us who like to create content in this space, like that would be kind of an exciting way to tell stories. So I think that that's definitely a good example of narrative design. And of course, game design is part of that, but since it's not necessarily a game by definition, I definitely see that more as an example of narrative design. But as we established, there's quite a bit of overlap there. So when it comes to being an awesome game designer, there's a lot of factors that go into that. And part of that is actually making games and writing games. So I think we should spend some time just talking a little bit about the creative process, because in our experience at the Storytelling Collective, establishing that process is often the first step for a lot of new writers, because learning how to ideate and actually make your project and bring that to fruition and see, you know, finished projects is something that takes quite a bit of practice. So yeah, Amani, I know you have a lot to say about this. So
I didn't mean to laugh.
No, I legitimately know that you have a lot of insight on this as a prolific creator yourself. So let me ask, like, when you are starting a new project, do you have a process, or does that change for every new project?
I have a theoretical process.
Okay.
But like, it's like, in theory, these are the steps I'm supposed to take. Almost every project that I've ever started has started off in like, so I'm a paper planner person. I have a calendar that has like for the entirety of the year. It'll start off with me randomly having a thought and then throwing it in the back of this notebook. And then I'll be like, oh, I've ran out of space, or rather I need more pages than probably could fit in this. And it becomes one of these notebooks. And then these notebooks just get filled with stuff. And like, it's just pages and pages with sticky notes. And it's just like, I should probably type. And eventually I'll get to the point where I'll go, I should probably type this out. And then I'll like go, okay. And then that'll be my second draft, because any stupid idea that I had in here that doesn't work in real life will be removed, because I'm not going to type out something that's not useful. And then it's basically just variations of that. It's like I went from the calendar, what was like a vague idea that might have made sort of sense, to like, okay, these are all the things that I probably need to get this to fit into a thing, into a, okay, I've run out of pages in this 180-page notebook, I probably should type this out. So, and it goes through 3 iterations before anyone else will actually see it. And then it's just like, does this make sense to someone else? And like, I'll like foster it off onto someone else and be like, read this and tell me what makes sense in this. And then the person who's currently looking at one of my projects was like, yes, all of these things make sense, but not in this order. And I'm like, that's fair. It's literally the order in which it came out of my brain.
Sure.
But like I theoretically have like I'll reference, because Pathfinder is my favorite game in the whole entire universe. I'm looking around on my desk to find it, but I have the Pathfinder core rule book. I'll like look through the core rule book and be like, okay, if I have this index, I have this chapter, I have this section that are all there to make sure I've had most of the basics, and then like I'll just throw in whatever else I think I need from like Blades in the Dark. Like I spend a lot of time looking at indexes of games.
Sure.
Because someone already did it, so I'm not going to reinvent the wheel.
Yep.
We already know we need to play a game. I just need to make a better version of the thing that they gave me.
Sure. Yeah, well, I think you highlighted quite a few, I think, really valuable takeaways for designers in terms of that initial process. And actually, like one of the new lessons we just added to our Write Your First Encounter workshop is about like better brainstorming, and part of that is to come up with a lot of ideas, and the more frequently you ideate and you practice that, the better
more
you
refined it gets.
Exactly. And the better you are at identifying the ideas that are worth pursuing in, like in more like in a more official capacity. So it sounds like with your process, you just kind of write everything down. I think it's always valuable to document all of your ideas. You never know when you're going to use those ideas for various projects. And then it goes through that, that second stage where you kind of start to refine and kind of filter through your ideas, and you see the potential in that. And then eventually you share that with someone else. And I think that is a really great way to evaluate your own ideas, because I think for new writers, what we see a lot is that they come up with a great idea, but that's the only idea that they really choose to explore. And then what happens is when that idea maybe doesn't work as well, you hit a wall inevitably, right? That comes up in like every creative process. I can't think of anything I've done where I haven't eventually hit that wall. But with good ideas, you can navigate around that. But sometimes an idea just hits a wall, and that's kind of as far as you can get. And also knowing which ideas are worth pursuing means that you can decide what is the best use of that idea. So you might come up with a great idea, but it's better as a one-shot adventure, whereas another idea might be better as a full game or a full campaign setting.
Like sometimes you just have to like let it go. It's not, you can't fit that into a one-shot. I know it sucks, but you're 83 pages deep. Let it go. That was me. That was me with my original, my first adventure project. I was like, oh yeah, it's just gonna be like this little thing, and I'm like, la-di-da-di-da, and I'm like, oh, somehow I hit like 63 pages, and there's a system in the background of this thing. How did we get here? I'm like, oh well, I guess this is a whole thing now.
Sure. Yeah, we'll talk about project scope in just a minute.
Yes, I'm not good at that. I don't know what scope is. I just know eventually it'll get done in the next 5 years or the next 18.
Sure. I mean, everyone's process is and should be different. And only we can really find out for ourselves, like what are our good ideas, like what do we define as our good ideas. And there's a quote that we use in a lot of our workshops. It's actually a little video, but it's by Ira Glass, who's a NPR reporter. And basically the gist of it is that like, when you're starting out with your creative pursuits, you already kind of know what you think is good. You already have taste. That's like partly why you're pursuing a creative career. Well, of course you do. Of course, everyone does. You have things that you like, and it doesn't have
Listen, I think Fast and the Furious is the greatest non-franchise movie that come out in the last 2 decades. I don't have taste.
I think that's fine. I love the Resident Evil movies. I mean, that's questionable. So, but it's like, I think we all kind of know, we have our own rubrics for what we like, and we have our own our own taste, and it's okay to have that. It should be unique to you. You don't have to necessarily like what society considers to be good, and it's kind of no fun, honestly, sometimes. And there's a lot of reasons why things are in the, the Western canon, and that it's not always like the things that
Yeah,
are,
they're not always good. Some
of
them
course
should.
not. Yeah,
They were
exactly.
never good. We just didn't know any better.
Yeah, well, there's so many other voices and work to just interact with. So, but part of the gist of that quote is just that, like, we all kind of know what we think is good, we know what we like, and then when it comes to actually making our own creative work, we can apply that taste, but it does require being pretty ruthless about filtering through your own ideas and having your own criteria for what is your own good idea, what you think has potential, basing that off of lots of different factors. And what we see a lot in our community is that people, their initial idea will be something that they think is very like marketable or what will be popular, and sometimes it's better to just pick something that you feel really passionate about, even if that's not the most marketable thing. Hannah Renee, what do you think about like that kind of thought process there when you're picking an idea that's worth pursuing? Do you have any criteria that you use for your own projects?
Oh yeah, I'm definitely more in the camp of like picking something that I enjoy, and I'm like, hey, people will find it if they also enjoy it. But I also, I think I've gone into it with less of a I'm going to build a livelihood and career out of this, and more so in a way like this is something that I really love and am passionate about. And if it brings marketability and livelihood with it, if I'm able to kind of build an audience and use the flywheel effect to slowly work my way up there, then fantastic. But if not, I'm still having a lot of fun, because like one of my first title that I actually did make during the Write Your First Adventure campaign is called A Mischievous Mess, and it was I like the monsters were inspired by the children's series The Spiderwick Chronicles, and it was this fluffy like combat optional, like in fact combat almost non-existent adventure about trying to tidy up the home before the guy's husband gets home, and there might be a ghost in the walls, who knows. And it was just something that I would have liked playing. So I like designed for things that I would enjoy interacting with as a player and as a game master or dungeon master. And that's kind of how I follow my own heart with it. Like what I'm working on now personally, I'm working on a race of playable rhino folk because rhinoceros are my favorite animal. And I don't know if anybody is going to engage with that, but it's something that I'd like. So I'm like, why not? Let's go.
Sure.
And so I think that choosing something that you're passionate about and seeing where that leads, and also seeing if it has legs, because like I know that we were mentioning scope, like there are a lot of things that I have ideas for that don't really blossom into fully fledged campaign or adventure or module ideas. um and knowing when to say, okay, this is okay for just me, or okay, this is something that I think I can put out there and really polish, is it's a hard line to draw. um I think that also something when it comes to choosing ideas for me that really helps is like figuring out what I can do within a reasonable time frame.
Yep.
So, and like time frames especially, I have to try my hardest to fit into. I'm neurodivergent, so losing track of time is like my everyday really. And so I try to set like constant calendar reminders. In fact, I had to mute my calendar for this stream to make sure it wasn't dinging at me while we were discussing this, just to make sure that I'm staying on track. And also surrounding yourself with people that like support you but also are willing to be critical. My partner, Sounds of Bones, he's also a narrative designer in the field, and he like I trust him to come forward and be like, hey, can you like look over this monster stat block? What do you think of it? And like he'll give me honest feedback of like, oh, like this is a good idea. I see where you're going with it, but did you consider XYZ, or why did you put this in here if it's not going to? And like having people around you who will also kind of keep you in check, I think is a good way of narrowing your ideas into something workable.
Absolutely. Yeah, you touched on so many things that I feel like we could easily have our like whole sessions about. But I think one thing that you mentioned, about being neurodivergent is that that's why everyone's process is different and should be different. And part of what we try to do at the Storytelling Collective is we try to provide a sample process just to get people started, because I think it's really difficult to craft a creative process when you've never really started and completed a project before. There's just so many unknowns there. But our goal is always for people to more evaluate what they don't like about it so that they can add in their own steps and their own process changes, so that it is unique and specific to you and that it helps you and your creative goals. So I think that that's a really important thing to touch on as well. But yeah, I think when it comes to ideating, it's really about what you love, and that will carry you through the messier parts of the projects. I always think of the middle phase of a project as the messy middle, because everything just gets weird and you're just trying to find your way. And I read a good quote recently that about writing novels. And it's basically like the first time you write your novel, the first draft is you telling the story to yourself. And so really the same with game design is you're telling the story to yourself first and foremost to kind of get it out of your head and make it into something, and then you can refine it from there. But just kind of to wrap up our conversation on ideas, Jack, you see a lot of different titles in the community. I mean, from that perspective, when people are thinking about like things like marketability, do you think that really makes too much of a difference, or do you see any like trends when you're looking at titles, or is it just anything that any insight that you can provide there from that perspective?
Um, the biggest trend on things like DM's Guild is figuring out what the big release is and kind of trying to make an idea for that. But on like a smaller scale, I see just wild things all the time. And it's really cool. Like there's always stuff that like I never would have thought of, and it sounds like it's such a cool idea, and somebody ran with it and makes it into a whole thing. I think the biggest question I get is, or not really question, but I see is people being afraid to do an idea because they think it's already been done before.
Oh, sure.
And it's like you're not going to do the same thing as somebody else, even if they're similar. Yours might do one thing better than theirs does. Somebody might be able to take both of them and do something with them. So just because you think that like I'm not doing something original, if you're passionate about that idea and you think it's going to go somewhere, like follow it.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a aside for that one. Speaking of people who think they have the same idea as someone else, one of the games that I made is a game called It's Dangerous to Go Alone, Take This. Which, come on, like, if you know Zelda, you know where this is going. And it's literally an improv game about you pulling random items from your bag and then going on and being sent on an adventure. But as I was saying this out loud on Twitter, like going, someone else had to have this thought. Literally, I don't know if you know, it was either Jayon, whose name I'm probably mispronouncing, because I don't think I've ever heard her say it out loud. But someone else that I follow on Twitter was like, "Oh yeah, this was something I put up on my Patreon." I'm like, "I don't even follow you on Patreon, and this was a great idea." And I was like, "Well, I won't do it if you've already done it." And she's like, "No, you can totally do it because it's totally her from my idea. They just happen to be based on the same general idea of Zelda washing up on a beach and being sent on an adventure."
Mm-hmm.
Like, just because you have a similar thought to someone else doesn't mean you're going to execute it the exact same way. Because I like to joke that there's literally never been an original thought in the entire universe. Everything is someone else, I promise you, has thought it before.
Mm-hmm.
They just haven't done it the way you're going to do it. Like, no one's had an original idea since that one time that snake convinced that woman to eat that fruit. But even before that, that was a second attempt at that. So, realistically, sorry, I didn't mean to be blasphemous. I'm casually blasphemous sometimes.
Casually Blasphemous sounds like an amazing like band name, or maybe your next game. I don't know.
Ooh.
Just gonna put that out there.
all the ways in which we've done this already.
I mean, I think that those are all really good points, though, because I think, and again, what we see through the Storytelling Collective is that sometimes we as creators can be kind of like precious about our ideas. Like sometimes people don't want to share because they're like, I don't want someone else to steal my idea. But
You can't steal an idea.
Well,
I mean, you can steal an idea, but you can't steal the. It's like you can't copyright an idea because anyone can have the exact same idea as you. It's all about execution and the similarities in the execution that is what you can get mad at someone about. Which I just know that because I work in TV. Like I promise you, someone else they've stolen your idea. They just it's the things where you can point out the exact thing that this exact piece of your thing is the same as my thing, not the general idea of the thing.
Sure. And I think, like, I mean, as we all kind of touched on, like, I always think of creativity as just a big conversation. Everyone's kind of contributing their piece of it. Everyone has different perspectives, different insight, and there aren't really any two ideas that will be exactly the same. Something that we've actually wanted to try for the Storytelling Collective is for one of our workshops, giving everyone the same prompt and seeing how they turn that into a different adventure, because everyone's adventure would be totally different. And I think that that would be a really fun and exciting thing, because I think it also brings the community together around a central concept, but everyone still gets to kind of work on their own individual project. So I don't know, maybe that's something we'll try in the future. And I think that when it comes to sharing ideas, having that feedback, like you mentioned, Hannah Renee, that's a really important part of a lot of people's creative process, because our imaginations and creativity and ideas sometimes can only go so far. And it's nice having that soundboard that someone else can be for us to kind of clarify our direction. So let's talk a little bit about project scope, which I know everyone here probably has different different perspectives on. And again, this is a stage in the process that looks different for everyone. Not everyone plans out a project scope. And basically how we define scope here at the Storytelling Collective is basically like, what are the parameters of an idea of a specific project? This is really what takes an idea to its project phase when it actually starts to become something. And what this can entail is a general time frame. What's the final output or deliverable? What's some of the kind of more specific stuff like word count or art? It's basically just setting up what are the parameters of a project so that when you're actually starting on it, there is some direction there. But not everyone necessarily factors that into their process. Imani, I know you said that scope was something that might not be your favorite thing. Do you plan out your projects? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Okay, so I have a theoretical one, like the thing that I write down that I'm supposed to do. Like again, let's see if you can read this on this little piece of. You see that it says goal. You can't really see it because it's badly written, and it's like it says 2023. That's
Okay.
the goal.
Sure.
That's the goal that I set myself. 2023. Mind you, it's 2021, so I got 2 years. But you're also talking to the person whose cousin told them that they were having a baby 23 years ago, and I took a baby blanket that I still have only gotten about maybe a foot by a foot. Like, and every time I see my cousin, I'm like, oh wow, this can fit on your bed eventually. I never stopped working on it. I do like one row a decade. And I feel like eventually it'll get done. But with most of my projects, I give myself like a general idea. Like my first project was Hot Off the Press, which I did for a game jam. So I had to the end of the game jam to finish it. And then I put it away for a while. And then at some point or another, I was like, okay, I'm going to do a version 2 for the anniversary. And then I'm going to do a version 3 for the anniversary. So like once a year, I have until August to get a new version of that thing done with some sort of major change between the version that it was before to the version that it is now. I have no idea what those changes are going to be, but I was like, something will change that I can update this thing on itch.io. But yeah, I don't believe like scope is a real thing. Like you should scope creep. I didn't rephrase it. Scope creep is a real thing.
Yep.
I just kind of go. I don't factor it into my time, but my deadlines are all fast and loose. At least for my own personal projects. If anyone ever asks me to do something, then I can't have scope creep. I have to do the exact thing that they asked me to do and nothing more, nothing less. Sure. But I've also written like 25,000 words in 3 days. So
yeah. So whatever you're doing seems to be working for you, which
Yeah,
is
like
again, part of the
either
process.
yeah, like the eventually something will get done. It may not be the original thing that I wanted, um, but like I'll be satisfied with the outcome. Like, it's like I went to bake a cookie and somehow I ended up baking like cookies with salt in it, but it's not the cookie that I wanted. It's not like a double chocolate chip cookie that I started out making. It's like a salted caramel chocolate chip cookie. But I'm still happy. It's still a cookie. Like it is in the correct shape, form, and I can eat it.
That's a beautiful sentiment. I feel like we should include that in our next workshops. I love that
I-
analogy.
Somewhere in my life, there's a Twitter thread that I made where I used a really good version of that. Where basically it's just like, yeah, it's so long as you didn't put baking soda in it or baking whatever it is, the one you're not supposed to put in. As long as you don't do that thing, you're fine.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Um, Jack, what do you think about project scope? So every time we run the workshop, you've been around long enough to know that we always provide, parameters in the workshop to help give people that structure. I'm sure you've heard me say a million times that structure is good for creatives, because otherwise, if you don't have any sort of structure, sometimes having an overwhelming amount of ideas or options is kind of not conducive to your creativity. So what do you think of that? I mean, you've observed thousands of students go through our program. So what do you think about project scope?
It I think is probably the toughest thing because people get into and they start and they're really excited.
Sure.
They probably already had an idea before it started that they then have in their head maybe even expanded upon, and they start to follow what our guidelines and stuff and do what we're telling them, and they realize that, oh, this one shot is actually a huge campaign. And the thing to always remember is that if you're making something, you can always add on later. So you can start and make a part 2, and that can be bigger, and a part 3, and that can be bigger. And just getting that first little bit done is going to be the biggest step to making more stuff.
Yep.
And as you start to because when you start to build too big, you, like I said, you start to feel overwhelmed, and you're just going to end up being like, I can't do this because it's huge, and it's probably nobody could do that. Like, building a whole campaign in a month is crazy. And we have seen a few participants go from they've started making that small one shot and have published then a bigger campaign, but they don't publish that campaign for like a year. So they end up working on that one thing for a very long time.
I mean, what's that one guy who made David? We can't all start with this giant block of granite that has nothing in it and then slowly chip away at it. Some of us have to just work our way up via clay. I'm good at metaphors. I'm sorry.
I thought you were talking about like there was some like really huge title out recently called David, and then I was like, oh, you mean the sculpture?
I mean the sculpture. Like, imagine it's sort of as a giant rectangular block of nothing.
I'm gonna make that a man.
Yeah, it's like no, that's a lot of choice paralysis is a real thing. Yes. No, I did a paint by numbers, guys. And once you master paint by numbers, you might say screw the colors that they pick and choose whatever colors you want on it. But you think at least I have a foundation for the thing. I'm not making David. Like, I cannot make David.
Even was that Michelangelo's David?
I don't know.
I think it was Michelangelo.
Oh yes, the Michelangelo.
Yeah, I think even he didn't start off. David wasn't his first piece.
I don't know.
No,
that.
Yeah.
It probably started off with much smaller scale. And
I don't believe that.
No, he was. Are you kidding me, Jack? No, he was 3 years old and sat at a piano and made David.
He sat at a piano. I think scope is very walk before you can run, crawl before you can walk.
Yeah, like that reminds me of one of my favorite quotes in creating is that never compare your chapter 1 to someone's chapter 20. Yes. Like your favorite creators will make it look so easy, and you'll see somebody who like produces something every week and it's always fantastic and it gets platinum on the drive-through RPG, and you're sitting there like, well, I could never do that. No, you can't right now, but you could probably work your way, and maybe you can't ever do that. Maybe that's just their process versus yours. Like, I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, but like somebody was telling me like Mozart could produce tons and tons and tons constantly, whereas like Beethoven, struggled to produce things every now and then. And they're both remembered today as like really good composers. So like,
Yep.
who cares? Like, don't compare your chapter 1 to someone's chapter 20. And
Yes.
I think that also something I wanted to touch on is that, like Jack was mentioning, people who, like, you know, you come in, you have this amazing idea, and I think that that can often petrify yourself with that paralysis of enormity of like, well, if I can't produce like this huge campaign setting that's this big source book that I can put on Kickstarter and make thousands of dollars to produce this beautiful work, then what's the point? And I think that keeping scope pinned down and then adding to it later rips off that band-aid of that first publishing fear, because I feel like once you have something under your belt to move from, it really does become a lot easier, or at least more manageable. That's at least my experience. Like, before publishing anything, it was this massive undertaking, and then once I got it out of the way, I was like, okay, yeah, I can do this.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I was recently researching imposter syndrome, something that I think affects a lot of people in our community, for a podcast I recently recorded. But and honestly, that's its own topic that we could talk about. But basically, imposter syndrome is when you feel, unqualified for the opportunities that you're given. You feel kind of like a fraud or a phony. It affects a lot of creatives. But one aspect of imposter syndrome is basically setting really unrealistic goals for yourself and then feeling awful when you don't meet those goals. But part of that is if you set reasonable project scopes, especially early on in your creative journey, you're giving yourself a real chance of success because you're able to tackle those reasonable projects. Like writing a whole campaign setting, like when I think, a full robust campaign setting in 1 month is not a very feasible goal, even for experienced designers. I can't think of even the most experienced people I know wouldn't even do that. So it's okay if you can't do that. It's not so much that we ever want to, prevent people from being very ambitious and pursuing those dreams. But the more realistic you can make your schedule and your scope and your process, you're actually giving yourself a real chance at that success. Amani, would you like to add to that?
Oh, I was thinking like it's a difference between like yes, shoot for the moon, land in the stars. That is a thing,
Mm-hmm.
but you can land in the stars and then drown. So maybe don't do that. Like maybe, or if you don't have a parachute or you don't know how to swim, like they're like listen, you can aim high and not reach your goal and it be fine. But like so long as you know when you hit the not the goal point that you're not gonna be like wildly unhappy with yourself. Like, be like, okay, I still managed to accomplish this thing. I'm still floating in space. Like, I didn't make it to the moon, but I'm still walking in space. Like, okay, that's you're still proud of that. As opposed to me who would get to space and then freak the fuck out. But
that's valid. I think everyone feels that freak out stage with any creative project.
yeah,
Like there's no process that fully addresses the hard parts about creating work, but the more you do it and the better you work with your own creative process and your own thought process, and you're actually building that realistically. Like my
yeah,
process won't look the same as everyone else's and vice versa because it's based off of my needs. And I think that, folks who struggle with any sort of mental illness, like we need to factor that into our processes and make that something that's realistic and can't base that on other people. And like
yeah,
you mentioned, HR, like neurodivergence, like there's so many factors that go into creativity, and everyone's scope and process should be based off of those things and take those things into account. And there's nothing shameful or bad about that. It means that you're actually giving yourself a fair chance to pursue your dreams. You're not a failure if you can't finish something that was already kind of on an unrealistic schedule or expectations for ourselves. And I know some people are talking about imposter syndrome in the chat. I do not want to like promote my own stuff, but I did just record a podcast about imposter syndrome. I have a podcast called Your Creative Heartbeat. So if you look it up on Spotify or Google, etc., I found some interesting research about it so that you might find that helpful. Since we only have really a few minutes left, and then I want to get to our outros. One more thing I wanted to talk about with being an awesome game designer is not necessarily about actually doing the game design, but it's also being an awesome game designer, meaning being a part of a community and being a good collaborator and just a good artist. And this is actually a lesson that we added to our workshop last year. It's one of the last lessons. I think it's basically like how to be an awesome designer in the community, because it's more than just about us creating our own art. We are part of an industry and a community. So Jack, as our community manager, is there one thing that you can recommend to people when they are joining, the tabletop community and getting into this line of work? Is there something that you can recommend that will improve their experience?
Um, I get this question actually a lot through DM's Guild. I always recommend joining like Discord servers for creators. There's a couple of unofficial DM's Guild one. There's an official drive-through RPG server for publishers, and there's official Facebook groups. All of those, reaching out and following other creators on Twitter, um, and even in the discussion tabs on the products on different platforms, and just talking to other people, and like you'll create those connections, and then when projects come up, you know they'll be like, hey, I saw this thing you did and I really liked that, and I think we could incorporate and work together, and creating those you know associations with you being a creator and in the space, and it can be probably pretty scary to like put yourself out there online and stuff, but most people in the community are really cool about just like finding new people to work with, because there's always people coming in and leaving. So there are people who go on and do other things, so it's always good to have fresh blood.
For sure. Yeah, I want to, there's again, another topic for another day because there's so much we can talk about with here, but I want to be able to address the question that we got in the chat. But one more thing I want to touch on with that is that something that we consider really important as part of the Storytelling Collective is designing for accessibility. And we have lessons in our workshops that's actually about the logistical part of that, like making your your published game modules, accessible for people who use screen readers. But it goes so far beyond that. It's really just factoring in, how to write work that is, respectful of each other in the community, that takes into account, the everyone's different perspectives and life experiences. So I think that the more that we can do those things as a community, the better off our work will be, and the better off our community will be. So that's something to for us all to think about and kind of strive toward. I wish we could talk more about that, but we're just getting to our time limit. But I do want to address one of the questions that we got, which is, does writing shorter things like adventure modules help you learn better than writing longer things like a Powered by the Apocalypse based game? I'm wondering if there is a faster feedback effect. I think we all kind of have probably things to say about this. I would just say that I think writing anything and writing and completing a project, no matter the medium, is good practice. It will help you with all of your creative endeavors. Like we did a flash fiction challenge earlier this year, and a lot of people had not really written fiction a lot, but they ended up writing little short vignettes for use in their campaign guides for tabletop. And just that process of just writing something very short and manageable every single day helped them with a project like that, even though those are different projects and different mediums. So I will say that in general, working up to bigger projects using any sort of smaller projects is always a good idea. Amani, do you have any kind of thoughts on that? Anything you can suggest?
Yeah, I was saying in chat
yes.
that I so in 2020 or 2019, I guess the end of 2019 into 2020, I decided that I was gonna write 26 B6 size games. The B6 size is, this is A5 size, so it's like slightly bigger than this size game. And it was good in the sense that it let me try out a bunch of different things.
Sure.
I discovered that I make way too many card games, just as an aside. But also it let me like try out different things, try the same thing in a different way, and then make the thing that I like, figure out what I liked from the things I had done before to make something better. But I didn't finish all 26 of them. I have literally an outline for all 26 of them. But COVID happened. But like I think writing a bunch of like, it didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to be playable. Like it was just like figure out, it's like throw, it was like, it's sort of like throw something at the wall, see what sticks. But it's like throw something at the wall, and is
is it art? Sure. Jackson Pollock made billions of dollars doing this. Clearly, this is art. But it's like, okay, so what part of that art did I like? And then do that again on purpose.
Sure. Yes, I mean that's part of crafting your creative process is just doing a lot of work. Not everything you make is going to be amazing, and that's okay. It's part of learning how you like to work. And sometimes you do have to just kind of throw things at the wall and see what sticks. But the more you do that, the more things actually stick.
You'll learn. Like I learned, I like making card games. Like, or rather, I like making games that involve cards. I guess the better way to state that. But like, I wouldn't have known that until I made like 6 of them, and I realized, oh, of the 26 games I've made, 8 of them have cards, and 6 of them I don't hate. Like,
yes, and I think practicing that a different medium too is also really helpful. Like because you did so much of that, you did learn what you did really like to create. Because I think some people think that they're like, I want to write a book and then I'll love writing novels, only to get halfway through a book and be like, this sucks.
It's terrible. I hate this.
Yeah. And again, that's different for every person. And we found that like in our community, we did a poetry challenge a couple months ago, and I got quite a few Discord messages from people who were like, I hate poetry, but I might try this anyway. And they ended up actually liking it, not necessarily to make it their new thing, but to incorporate that kind of approach to writing into their other work. And so I think as writers, the more we can experiment and practice with different mediums, the more we learn about our process. So to answer your question, that does writing shorter things like adventure modules help you learn better than writing longer things? In a way, yes, because it's less about learning how to write a specific type of thing and more about learning how you like to write. And once you learn that, learning the more nuanced aspects of narrative and game design become a lot more approachable because of that process. Oh, Hannah Renee just noted or just pointed out that we all have glasses. You know, this was the uniform that I established for this panel today. So thank you everyone for coming in their uniforms. Yeah, I guess we're also, all very much like writers.
No, I'd also like to add, speaking about like writing different things, because you mentioned poetry is. Like I said earlier, my day job is film and TV, but I literally in every form of not every form, but pretty much any form of writing you could throw at me, and I'd be like, yes, I've tried that, and either I liked it, I didn't like it. From radio dramas to like plays to like plays that are intended to be played versus plays that are intended to be spoken aloud, like monologue type things, to like movies and TV shows. I did poetry for a while. Like I tried a bunch of different things in the last like 20 years to decide what I did and didn't like. And so far, what I discovered that I like more than is like novels, but specifically novels with branching paths, which is better executed as a video game or as a TV show. Like I like writing TV shows specifically and branching narratives in video games. Those are the 2 things I like doing best, because movies are I don't feel like you can tell enough story in a movie that you can tell in a TV show. Like I'd rather do 6 2-hour episodes than 1 3-hour movie. Like, but it took me writing a bunch of things to figure that out. I like writing audio dramas because I hate describing things. Like,
sure, yeah.
So,
I think that honestly, that's actually a great kind of note to leave our discussion on. Since we are at our time, I feel like we could have easily continued talking about all these things for like hours. Oh, yes. There's one question. Can you tell us where we can find you on Twitter and social media? I will say that in just one moment as we start to wrap up. But thank you so much to everyone for joining our discussion today. This was a really great chat. I feel like there's so many things to talk about when it comes to the creative process. Being an awesome game designer entails a lot of different things. But I hope that some of the points that we brought up today will, help you in your creative journey. So we'll do outros. And then when I get to mine, I will share where you can find the Storytelling Collective. But Imani, would you like to promote anything you'd like to share and tell people where they can find you?
I just dumped my cards link in chat. It contains all the important links to anything. I think it's mostly accurate because I think I just updated it the other day. But it has my Twitter link, my H.io page. You can sign up for my newsletter, which I only started a newsletter because of Storytelling Club.
And it's very good.
You're like, oh yeah, use Tiny Letter. I'm like, okay, sure. So please sign up for my newsletter. It goes out supposedly once a week, but like definitely no more than once a week. Like they won't be one every day. They'll definitely only be one in a week. And I'm on Twitter, like I said. I theoretically have a Discord. I don't know if it's actually linked in that card. But yeah, you could most easily find me on Twitter. I am mcatterdev on Twitter. Except for this week, except for the 5 days in which I took off Twitter this week, I am on Twitter at any given moment in time.
Yes, and you're well worth following on Twitter. You post a lot of interesting things about game design and narrative design, all of your various projects.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing your link.
Yes.
You're so prepared. This is why we
No,
have you on the
no,
panel, because you're so like, here's my link. Here's all the
No,
cool
it's
stuff
because
that I do.
I have a digital business card that I got from when I went to a convention, and it, like when you tap it, the NFC links to that website. So
Brilliant.
I keep it updated forever. It's like here,
Yeah.
I never have to print a new business card.
Yep, that's very smart. So creatives, take note. Honestly, everything that Imani does is good practice. Jack, would you like to tell folks where they can find you and anything that you would like to share?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. Jack's not funny. It's ironic.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
No, yeah. I don't do a lot on Twitter. I don't write anything. I mostly work with Storytelling Collective, and then but I am always around at One Bookshelf. You can email dmsguild@onebookshelf.com, and that will come to me, and I will help you if you have questions. I answer a lot of questions for people, so it's not that big a deal. If you seriously, I answer a lot of questions for people on there. I think people will get scared of emailing us with just like, oh, maybe it's not that big a deal, but just shoot us an email. I probably have an answer. If not, I can find one.
Yes, Jack is a great resource for all the creators in our community. Oh no, we lost him.
I broke it. I broke it.
We almost made it to the end successfully, but
now I'm Ashley. It's great.
You know what? You are welcome to be me. I will gladly. Who am I? Oh,
you're now HR.
Ruined everything.
Jack is now me.
I'm not cool enough to be HR, but I will certainly make an attempt. But I will let HR share where you can find them on the interwebs.
Yes, I am actually HR. And yes, so you can find me at HR Bumga on pretty much everything. I'll actually also submitting the card link is a good idea, so I'm gonna copy your idea, Imani. And but yes, so that card link will have access to A Mischievous Mess, which I talked very briefly on earlier in this stream. It's my adventure, and it also has information on that Not Another Monster Quest book that's coming out soon, very soon, like in the next couple of weeks, I think. Like, wow, volume 1. So that's very exciting. It'll be on kobolds, bugbears, and goblins, and each volume will have kind of a different set of monsters, and it's a very exciting project. I'm very excited about it. And yeah, HR Bumga on Twitter, Instagram, the works. And I think that covers it for me.
Okay, well, I am Ashley Warren. You can find the Storytelling Collective at storytellingcollective.com. I'm going to do what everyone else is doing and post the links in the chat, which I definitely had prepared and didn't just hastily open.
I did just hastily open mine. It just.
I mean, I had my notes prepared, but links, I guess, were another thing altogether that I just totally forgot about. But you can find the link to Storytelling Collective in the chat. If you are a former RPG Writer Workshop participant, our old domain still works and leads to that website, rpgwriterworkshop.com. That remains a program within the Storytelling Collective umbrella. You can find us on Twitter, putting the link in there, at Storytelling COL. We had to truncate our handle at a very obnoxious point, so you can find us there, and you can find me and all my work on my website, which is scribemind.com. I will post that link there, and then I promise I will stop posting links here. And I offer creative mentorship through my Patreon, along with other resources for creatives. So basically, you can always find me at the intersection of storytelling and learning and creative support. Imani did mention in the chat that she streams tabletop game design and development on your Twitch channel, which I think
is the Twitch channel that I'm talking to you from. I stream technically every day except for Monday. And Friday I stream Final Fantasy supposedly, but that might be a lie. And Sundays I stream paper planner stuff where I pretend that I'm going to have plans for the next week.
That's always fun. Gosh, I love planner content. That really.
I know.
inspires.
I love it.
Yes, it's so nice.
It's so funny doing it on Twitch and not on YouTube though, but
True.
YouTube scares me.
It's its own community there.
Yeah.
And then one final thing I wanted to bring up is that we are preparing for our summer Write Your First Adventure workshop. So if you are looking to get into the tabletop industry, it's a really great place to start. I know I'm biased when I say that, but really we've had thousands of writers go through our programs. It's been truly amazing to see just the trajectory of their creative careers. We'll have a system agnostic path that, I don't know, Amani might have something to do with. Possibly you might see her as an instructor in there, just, as a little teaser. We'll have 2 other game paths, one of which I can't announce just yet, but it'll be very cool. And then we'll have our D&D path as well. So we try to cater to as many different designers as possible. But regardless, it's always a great experience. Our community rocks. Lots of great help and support there. So you'll be able to find that at storytellingcollective.com. And we have a newsletter that you can sign up for at our website. All the good stuff is there. And we have tabletop courses that you can take at any time of the year. They're not specific to time frame. So you can take a marketing course, a course all about treasure. It's super cool. And then one about actually planning out your own campaign setting. So if you want to,
and then the one about Notion too.
Yes, there's a Notion course by yours truly. So if you like planning on all that good stuff, that's a course for you. And there's one called Identifying Your Creative Heartbeat, which is about basically how you start your creative process. So if some of the things we talked about today are still a little bit elusive to you, that might be a good course to check out because it kind of outlines each step in the creative process and how to figure out what works for you. Okay, that's my final pitch. Whew, had a lot of things to share. But thank you to all my guests today. It was great to chat with you all. And
Thanks
thank you
for
to
having me.
everyone who participated in the chat. And I think that's all we have for you. So I hope everyone has a wonderful Dungeon Con. And thanks to that whole crew for inviting
Dragon
us
Con?
in. Dungeon Con. Dragon Con is, I think, later this year.
It literally says Dragon Con online.
No, it doesn't.
It says
Yes, it does.
Dungeon Con.
Oh, where is that? Oh, there. But on the low, it is. Okay, so our producer for the stream, only we can hear them. So they just communicated that it does say Dragon Con online in the description, but I believe the official con is called Dungeon Con, as what's specified in the logo. So you can see how there's been a little bit of
yeah, I was just
confusion
like
there.
when you said Dragon Con like before, I was like that seems weirdly wrong schedule, but okay. Okay.
So anyway, Dungeon Con this
Yes.
weekend.
Our producer is awesome, by the way.
They are.
So
They
this
are.
is
Truly,
why.
yes. We're very grateful for having their help to produce our stream. It's always, it's hard to moderate and run your own stream and do all these things. So thank you so much to the whole crew at Dungeon Con. We'll allow it to be called Dragon Con, whatever, anything goes here. So, but yes, in general, thank you to everyone. And that's all we have for you. Hopefully we'll see you in one of our workshops and on Discord. So yeah, I think I think Alana's going to play us out. So I'm just going to kind of like move around.